When the Super Famicom was released in November of 1990, it introduced the first multi-out to ever ship with a Nintendo console. That multi-out port supplied composite video, S-video, and RGB, all from that one proprietary connector. The multi-out was next used in 1993 for the re-release of the Famicom, which was referred to as the AV Famicom, specifically because of the addition of that port. This port only supplied composite video, as S-video and RGB weren't supported from NES consoles. The multi-out was next seen in 1996 with N64s, but RGB was omitted from all of them, with some PAL consoles lacking S-video as well. The final use of this multi-out was the 2001 GameCube's analog output port, which offered composite video and S-video in NTSC regions, and composite video and RGB in PAL regions. So what do all these Nintendo multi-outs have in common? First, they're all compatible with the same composite video cable. Next, they're all compatible with the RAD2x. At the moment, the RAD2x cables are the only plug-and-play solution for classic game consoles that treat the image correctly and don't ruin the experience overall. Now, I have a whole other detailed video that shows examples of exactly why these statements are true, but I wanted to have a separate video dedicated to its use just with Nintendo multi-out consoles, because I think there's a ton of advantages that this one cable could provide across a bunch of different systems. So let's start with the first Nintendo console to ship with this multi-out, the Super Nintendo. To use a RAD2x with any of the Super Nintendo models, simply plug it in and plug in an HDMI cable to the other end. I like to use cables that are mini HDMI on one end and regular HDMI on the other, but if you'd like to use cables you already have, you can get adapters for just a few dollars. You can see as we power it on, the LED light on the RAD2x turns red, then scans for a signal. Once it finds the RGB signal, the light turns purple and the HDMI signal is sent to the TV. That's it, just plug it in and get a great quality signal. As a note, all footage in this video is taken with a Panasonic GH5 camera positioned in front of my LG 4K TV. I think this is the most fair way to show how the RAD2x actually looks on an average TV, as opposed to digital captures that would have to be scaled into this video. Anyway, back to the SNES examples. One thing to note is later models of the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom that are nicknamed the One Chips output a much sharper picture. Just to be clear, you'd see this difference on every device, not just the RAD2x. I think the original Super Nintendo looks fine, but if you're chasing the sharpest pixels, try to find the later Model 1 chips. Now let's take a look at the Super Nintendo Mini, which is the same as the Super Famicom Jr. in Japan. These consoles ship from the factory only outputting composite video and not S-video or RGB. You can see as we boot the console, the RAD2x scans the signal and automatically detects that only composite video is present. The LED light now turns yellow, and the RAD2x becomes a composite to HDMI cable. The picture isn't as good as when using RGB, but I really like that the RAD2x still acts as a plug-and-play device and just works. Luckily, there's a really easy mod you can perform that re-enables RGB output on the SNES Mini. Just drop the RGB board over the AV pins, solder the connections, and bring the RGBS signals from the points on the motherboard to the new mod board. Now the SNES Mini can output a signal that's considered some of the best quality RGB you can get from an original console. I really like how people starting out can just buy a RAD2x and start using it right away on all models of the SNES, and if they have a Mini, it'll still work with no fuss and no input button to mess with. Then, if they decide they'd like to upgrade to RGB, the RAD2x will just automatically boot in that mode with no changes necessary. At the moment, no other HDMI cable on the market could even come close to doing that. The AV Famicom was the only 8-bit Nintendo console to ever ship with a multi-out, but since the chips that generate the signal on all of those consoles only output composite video, that's the only signal that you'll be able to get unless you've modded your NES. Once again, we see the RAD2x boot into composite mode, represented by the yellow LED light. The signal isn't terrible, and about what you'd expect from a TV that processes composite video correctly. I still think it's an upgrade over going direct, as most TVs process 240p over composite as 480i, causing a flicker, and 480i processing will almost always add lag. Honestly, this mode doesn't look too bad, especially considering that many people are used to the soft look of NES games anyway. I bet many people will find this a good enough solution without modding their console at all. But if you'd like the best picture possible, you could install a NES RGB kit for the highest quality video signal and better color palettes. It's not an easy install, but one that's definitely worth it for people chasing the best signal. As a note, as long as the install is done correctly, you could even use a Nintendo Multi-Out on any NES RGB installation, and the RAD2x will still be compatible. Once again, make sure you know what you're doing though, as a bad installation could be disastrous. N64 consoles all came with a Nintendo Multi-Out connector, but none of them had RGB enabled. I'm not sure if this was a cost-saving technique on the part of Nintendo, or if it was the fact that the composite video of N64s actually looks great, especially when you consider that Nintendo was counting on the blending of those low-res 3D graphics. Now, every model of N64 can be modded for RGB, and some could even be done with a very cheap mod. For those N64s, all that's required is soldering a chip over some pins and soldering a few wires. Later model N64s, like the Funtastic ones, require a much more difficult installation though, that usually requires a professional installer. Once again, the RAD2x will work with a completely unmodified N64 in composite video mode, and it actually looks pretty good. I think it's because the 3D graphics blend together nicely with the blurring of composite video, where 2D graphics from the 8 and 16-bit Nintendo consoles lose sharpness when using composite on a flat panel. Also, there isn't as much color interference with other consoles, since the N64 just doesn't have the high-frequency luma that causes luma-chroma crosstalk that something like a SNES might have. Of course, with an RGB mod, you can get the sharpest image and best colors possible from an N64. Once again, the RAD2x will automatically detect if your N64 is RGB modded when it boots, and you'll see the LED glow purple. I think the coolest thing about using a RAD2x with the N64 is a smoothing filter that helps reduce the blocky look of 3D graphics. I didn't show this filter before as I don't think it makes 2D games look good, but in my opinion, it really helps the N64's 3D graphics. Also, while the filter works great with composite video, when you combine it with an RGB mod, you get the advantage of the high quality colors and sharpness of RGB, with the blocky look smoothed out. I definitely need to take a moment to discuss S-video output, as there were a ton of comments on the original RAD2x video asking why it doesn't support it. Respectfully, I think a lot of those commenters just didn't understand how S-video applies to the N64 or to the overall use case of the RAD2x. So, please allow me a moment to explain. First, and most importantly, there isn't a huge difference in quality between composite video and S-video on the N64. Overall, bright screens look pretty similar, and while you can see some differences in dark screens, it isn't as drastic as with other consoles. Also, while NTSC N64s offer S-video output, not all PAL revisions do. As a result, if the RAD2x added S-video support, not only would there be a cost added to include components for the extra signal, but it might cause compatibility issues with those specific PAL consoles, and both defeat the purpose of a universal plug-and-play device. I think the RAD2x is the perfect balance of simplicity while still offering RGB support, but if you really need S-video, just make sure to use the best and most cost-effective solution out there: the RetroTink 2X and some shielded S-video cables. There's other scalers out there that work great as well, but with the N64, the smoothing filter these products offer is much more beneficial than which signal you're using. In fact, if you already own a RetroTink, I still recommend just using the cables your N64 came with to save money, but at least all options are there. Please note that cheap, unshielded S-video cables look just like composite, so you'll need to spend extra money on good ones to make a difference. Speaking of money, the total cost of an RGB mod and the RAD2x might be cheaper than any S-video solution currently available, depending on which mod your console's compatible with. I just suggest stepping back and deciding what's the best solution overall for your setup. Before I get into talking about GameCube support, I just want to point out that with the RAD2x, GameCube support should really just be considered a bonus and in most cases not a focus. See, most models of the GameCube shipped with a digital out port that allows you to plug in an adapter that gets all of the resolutions the GameCube supports digitally. My favorite of those devices is the RGB from Insurrection Industries. This device gets you HDMI out and supports 480p games, which have graphics that look really great on flat panel TVs. You can even combine this with a cheap zero-lag HDMI to component converter, and for around $100 total, you now have a solution that supports all resolutions on both analog and digital devices. There's still a few scenarios in which the RAD2x might be a great choice for the GameCube though, so let's check them out. If you own a PAL GameCube, those models all support RGB output, which means if your favorite games are 240p or 480i, you'll be able to take advantage of its deinterlacing and line doubling. That means any non-480p game will essentially look like a GC video solution like the RGB. Also, the Game Boy interface software looks great with the RAD2x on PAL GameCubes. Check out the GBI section of the website for more info, but if your main use of the GameCube is for Game Boy Advance games and your PAL GameCube doesn't have a digital out port, the RAD2x might be the perfect solution. Speaking of homebrew software, if you boot with Swiss, you could try forcing games to run in 240p instead of 480i. I know it seems weird to lower a game's resolution, but forcing a progressive scan signal might look better for certain games, especially if you're stuck with a GameCube without the digital port and don't have the option for 480p. Also, launching your GameCube into Swiss will allow you to force certain regions, so you could play NTSC games on a PAL GameCube and vice versa. Just remember that the RAD2x passes through whatever region it receives, so if you're booting a PAL GameCube on an NTSC TV, you might not get a signal. Unfortunately, NTSC GameCubes don't output RGB at all, meaning your only choice is to use its composite video mode. If you're buying the RAD2x to use with other consoles anyway, I'd suggest giving it a try on your GameCube just to see what you think. Definitely try using the smoothing filter though, as just like with the N64, I think it really helps the look of 3D games. Overall, it doesn't look terrible with composite video, and certainly looks better than plugging your GameCube's composite output directly into a flat panel TV. A digital-to-digital solution like the RGB would definitely be better, but as I said before, if you're planning on getting a RAD2x anyway, at least it can hold you off until you're able to purchase a 480p compatible solution. And heck, it might be good enough for some people. At least it doesn't add any lag, and PAL users can take advantage of RGB. After a ton of testing across all different models of Nintendo Multi-Out consoles, I could honestly say that the RAD2x provides the best plug-and-play HDMI solution for anyone who's just looking for a way to connect their consoles to digital displays without any fuss. Please remember that overall value for your money is the most important factor here. All other plug-and-play solutions for the Nintendo Multi-Out available today add lag, as well as add a flicker to the image. Check out the original RAD2x video for a full explanation, but honestly, every other so-called HDMI cable I've tested for Nintendo consoles has been a complete waste of money. The RAD2x might be more expensive than some of those other cheap solutions, but I'd still consider them affordable, especially considering the performance you get out of it. Definitely check out my other videos if you want to see more info though, as I go into detail across all of the different consoles it supports. That's it for this time. If you liked this video and you want to see more like it, please consider signing up for any of my support services, such as Patreon or Floatplane, as it's your support that keeps these videos, the weekly podcast, and all the behind-the-scenes research going. Also, if you'd like to be kept in the loop of everything going on in the retro gaming scene, check out that weekly podcast available as a video and everywhere audio podcasts are found. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.